Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm in heaven. Welcome back to Gisselle Open Sourced. This is today's quote. The world will ask you who you are, and if you don't know, the world will tell you. It is very ingrained in us to believe we need to work X amount of hours, because X amount of hours pays us X amount of money. Being paid hourly removes our understanding of how much our labor is worth, and is then used, I might be saying too much now. Oh, they don't want you to know this. Back to the original topic with the flow state and working X amount of hours to earn X amount of money, and then moving into the startup world. That's what I have been conditioned by. And how this came into my awareness was when I was speaking with a friend, and I told him about my goal to work on Sonatic full-time by the end of the year. Full-time. He asked, what does full-time mean for you? And I thought, well, 40 hours a week, where it's the majority of my work time is spent dedicated to Sonatic. And since then, and especially in this past week where I challenged myself to live in a flow state, I started reconsidering that conversation. Where did I get that idea of full-time? Where did I get that idea of working 40 hours a week? Where did I get that idea of an 8-hour work day? We're lucky the 8-hour work day exists, because before it was a 7-day work week. Because there were no restrictions in place, I wanted to enter the flow state that would require me to release these external expectations, which would then mean I'm releasing this imagined control over my output that was handed to me as an arbitrary measure of a good day's worth of work. And thankfully, I'm also on this journey with other startup friends, and my friend Jay, shout out Jay, and my friend Jay had previously told me he started working 4 hours a day. And so I thought, I know that this is something that other people are exploring, and I didn't realize how attached I was to that expectation of outcome. I didn't realize that's what I was doing. And I guess the subconscious thought process behind it was if I meet this certain quota, which again, set by who, that I would be on time. I would be on track. But then I realized, in hand with what I said in the last video, I'm always on time. And so this week was bringing that into my awareness, dissecting this thought process that I've shared with you, and then taking on the challenge of living in the flow. And what that was like this week was very interesting. If I ever say interesting to you, that means one of 3 things. 1. Actually, I don't think I'm gonna post this. Editor, please cut that out. Yeah, I'm just gonna have my editor cut that out. So taking on this challenge and releasing those external expectations and trusting myself, I found myself to be even more on time. There is some type of work that makes people want to pull their hair out. And I think that's why it requires them to try to get into the flow by using external tools, when you are already equipped with that hardware to enter the flow state and maintain it. But when you're not living a life that you enjoy, where you do not feel aligned, I can see why that would have to be manufactured. Everything can be seen in a negative or positive way. I think about it in the art sense. In your first art class, you'll learn that a picture has positive and negative space. The positive being what is there, and the negative being what isn't there. That's another thing to keep in mind. How often are you looking at what isn't there when you can look at what is? Because that's your choice. And that is the sort of conditioning that we have as well. When it comes to hustle culture, I think the thought around that is, well, the more I'm working, the better I'm doing. Really being wealthy and rich doesn't come from who works the most. That is a treasure you find within yourself. And once you align with that and you invest in yourself, your external circumstances reflect that. And that's what I saw this week. I had a lot of flexibility with myself and my relationships. I allowed myself to do what I was wanting to do. And again, what you're wanting to do can be whatever you choose. But if you find that what you're wanting to do is not in line with the person you want to become, that means that you are not currently the person who does those things. And that's okay if you're not the person who wants to do those things yet. The first step to becoming that, if that's what you desire for yourself, is becoming aware of the gaps between who you want to be and where you are. And from there, you break down all of the choices that you are making right now in this moment. Who you are is the product of those choices. So figure out what choices you're making that are keeping you as this person. Figure out the choices that the person you are becoming makes. And then close that gap. Going back to the motivation and discipline, you don't have to force yourself either. I think this is where meditation comes in handy. Don't leave the video yet. I know meditation can be off-putting to some, probably because of old connotations. But really, I encourage you, if you want to make this as easy as possible, if you want to simply become the person that you are wanting, you can do that in this instant. But it will require you to become aligned with yourself. And that's where meditation comes in. I encourage you to try this out for 5 minutes. This is called a body scan. You just take inventory of your body where it's at right now. Wherever you have tensions, focus on that part and just breathe out. Release the tension. And really all of this is so literal. Like, tension is two things going against each other. You are tense, wanting to be something else, but being here, pulled between two things. Release that tension. You get to a point where you're fully present with yourself. You can then connect with the version of you that you want to be. You can, in this moment, feel as that person would. In this way, you can reverse engineer who you want to be. If you know how they feel, you can imagine how they'd act. If you know what choices they'd make, if you're already feeling that, if you're already in the place to make those choices as this person that you want to be would, you're there already. What keeps you separated is the mindset behind the choices you make. And this is, again, going back to that idea of breaking scripts. Very often people connect through suffering. And I understand that people want to share their pain. How that reflected for me was that I saw people suffering and sharing that with me. And I felt like I had to meet them where they were. And what that can look like is, oh, I hate Mondays. I hate the gym. Oh, that's the worst. This sucks so much. Oh man, I have to go do this thing. And having conversations that just center around complaining, I have released myself from that. I don't have to connect with people there. And now that I've become aware that there is a new way that I can engage with people, instead of feeding my energy into that suffering, I can remain where I am, empowered, embodied, fully in the present, and I can invite people into that. If that is not something that they're aware of, I can bring that into their awareness. What I'm saying is, this has become a norm in our conversations, and if you're wanting to break that, you'll be happier, but you may also notice that you will get different reactions. And so that's something to be aware of as well. What I took away from living in the flow, I think this is just my permanent state now. I think it's like once you find peace, you just keep choosing it. You just keep choosing it. I share this because there are many ways to perceive this world. There are many ways to experience this world. And I see a lot of people suffering. I think this is more a question of awareness. But if this resonates with you, if you want to live holy, and isn't that so literal? A holy life. There's so many things like that. BRB. Just had a meeting moved. I love that. This was part of my motivation of exploring this flow life, entering the flow of life, really, was that I wanted to really be as flexible as possible. There's so many ways to experience this life. Why are we sticking with what someone told us would work when we can pioneer our own way? Truly, this is the one that gets me. It's everyone's first time here. Depending on what you think, but this is our first life. And this is your first life. Who knows your life, your experience, period, because no one does. And who would know your experience in your life better than you? To tell you what to do, what to expect, when you are the creator of your life. That is all up to you, your choice, however you want to make it. Sometimes there's predefined paths, but there's also a reason there's a saying of thinking outside the box. One example of this is, hey Siri, what's the sport where you throw a ball? Hey Siri, what's the sport where you throw a really heavy disc? Discus throw. An example of this is the discus throw. There has been an evolution over history, which that's another thing. Let's remember that we are all connected to history, but that doesn't mean that we have to adhere to it. This is where the discus throw comes in. Over the years, since it started, there have been many different variations on how to throw a disc. You know, you might think of an overhand, but at one point people were doing cartwheels, and the way that you would play this is you're within a 2.5 meter diameter circle. So those are your parameters. This is a really great exercise on how to problem solve, find your parameters, find your goal. How do you get there? How flexible can you be with the journey, your expectations, the outcome? Before the fall started, I called this Prove It to Them Bitches Fall. I'm giving you the blueprint, and it's running behind the scenes, so don't worry. That's my experience with living the flow. Actually, I didn't even give you my takeaways. I just became so in tune with myself, which in turn then I became in tune with others, and that's another topic about what's yours and that illusion. There's no distinction between you and me. There's none. We might present ourselves differently, and that's called personality. I would really challenge you to try to find that in whatever way you can. Because it's much more fulfilling than having to force yourself. I think once you're forcing yourself, because I guess that's the whole point of flow, even in productivity, is it becomes enjoyable, easier. You forget that you're even working on it. You're not expending yourself. On to our next topic of business. Old business. I think that implies that we're new business. This is what I'm highlighting, is the attitudes and values behind business then versus now, and how we see that translated into the physical world around us. And this is an example of how we are living in history, and you have to be mindful of that. The world will ask you who you are, and if you don't know, the world will tell you. How much of who you are is based on what the world has imprinted on you. Maybe that's why you're having a hard time finding yourself, because you're not being yourself. You're being what other people have told you to be. The old sentiment was the customer's always right, and the implication here is that somehow staff and employees, they are not equal. My example with the In-N-Out window, where when you're going through the drive-thru, you'll see the In-N-Out staff, is a way that manifests in this world. By watching these individuals do their job through a window, in a way dehumanizes them. Because who else do we watch through windows? In case you didn't figure it out, it's the zoo. You go to the zoo to go watch animals, which that's another one. Like, how do we just, like, oh, that's an animal. 3 point back at you. We're all animals. Anyway, animal style. I just thought that was really interesting. It was a bit jarring. And the fact that I hadn't noticed that window since I was a kid, an average sedan is not letting you see what they're putting on the grill. So really, what's the point? It's symbolic. And again, this is In-N-Out. It's an old business. I just wanted to say to anyone that works at In-N-Out, ban the windows. I support you. They should pay you more. Now onto the words that I'm removing from my vocabulary. I think that's actually word number one. Word number one I'm removing from my vocabulary is I think. This one I'm personally fed up with because it's my favorite, apparently. I think is so unnecessary because clearly when I am speaking, and I think that's what it serves, the purpose it serves, I think is removing myself from the experience of communicating and prefacing. Initially, I was like, why am I always saying that? It's actually annoying me. There's a greater conversation to be had around this for specifically girls. And that's kind of the crazy one. It really gets me, even still, is men watch, women watch themselves being watched. And there are so many times that I've caught myself watching someone watch me. And what are we doing here? When it really manifests. Anyway, I think I'm removing that from my vocabulary. I can easily say my thoughts, and I will assume that the listener has a certain level of critical thinking to understand that what I'm conveying is my perspective, as that's what we are all doing. Why do you think we put the author's name on a book? So I think is out. That's on my list of outs. 2024 out. Another one is good and bad. When you are removing any sort of external expectations from your world perspective, you start to see how it shows up in unexpected ways. Women watch themselves being watched is a good example of that. Having an external perspective so deeply ingrained into yourself that is the way that you perceive the world. Imagine that. Now, good and bad. Start to think about it. Okay, good and bad, that can be based on what you think. But when we're all sharing the same word for it, aren't we all sharing the same meaning? That's what the dictionary is. To be on the same page about what's good or bad. What does it mean? And then no one can define that because fundamentally no one can define that. Good and bad are ultimately judgments. A conclusion that you come to about something and you shortcut your way to good or bad. And the reason why I'm removing this from my vocabulary, because initially I thought, well, like, this could be useful. It's a way that we communicate certain expectations to people, personal expectations of, I think this is good or bad. You're telling me you can't find any other quantitative or qualitative ways to describe your experience? So, good and bad, 2024 outs. It requires nuance. And that's what good and bad removes. Now that's in your awareness. Congrats. Next word is better. It's like saying, I want to be a better YouTuber. All right, girl, what does that mean? You are removing the opportunity for yourself to better understand yourself and your expectations. And how this applies for this example is, instead of saying, I want to be a better YouTuber, I could say, I want to be a YouTuber that does XYZ. And see, you now know what you expect from yourself. You now know what you're trying to say by better. You know what that looks like. And you know how to do that. Or at least you know how to move towards that. I'm telling you. Now, 2024 ends because that's another one. Why are we waiting for New Year's Eve when you can change today? 2024 in is I am. I am, period. Period. You define yourself. So go ahead. I am what I choose. Drake's voice kept playing in my head, which I haven't really listened to much of Drake since all of that. It's funny how he just naturally fell out of my purview. And I couldn't remember where this line was from, so I looked it up. He says, "Wham bam, thank you ma'am." It's from Hours in Silence. Turns out it's actually a callback to a song called Wham Bam, Thank You Ma'am. So here it is.
Wham bam, thank you ma'am. Hope you're satisfied.
Could have been a wham bam, thank you ma'am.
And back to how everything, everywhere, all at once, period. I've had this thought before, but I thought this person put it very well. Here's the video.
You can cleanse your phone and you can start seeing things you want to see. Then in real life, you can also cleanse yourself. Just simply don't listen to the news. Just simply do not react to the things that you do not want to see. It's like on TikTok. You don't want to see this one video because it pisses you off. Why are you going to react to it? By commenting. Therefore, it's just going to keep coming more of that.
Algorithms are everywhere. They do not just exist within programming. I mean, that's like the first exercise they do when they teach you algorithms is turn this real life experience into an algorithm. Then you code it, you're like, oh, I made a peanut butter jelly sandwich. What algorithm are you following? And also, like, very literally, how are you interacting with your algorithm? What is the algorithm mirroring back to you? Everything's a mirror. Art and ads. We really have to consider what we think of the consumer, and something that I noticed with social media content is that it has the assumption that the viewer is dumb. And sometimes there are videos I see on TikTok, especially AI ones. I'm like, how are people falling for this right now? And maybe that there's some truth in that. But if that's the intention from which we're creating, how much are we pushing our mission, really? Is it grabbing that low-hanging fruit, or are we actually trying to innovate? We Aren't Really Friends did a great job. Their mission is central to their messaging. If a person has a certain perspective, whichever way they speak is going to reflect that. Businesses are just collections of people with one mission. This is the video that inspired me.
Art is supposed to disrupt the system, guys. That's what art is. If it supports the system, it's an advertisement. We're gonna keep saying it.
So, again, I challenge you to really take inventory. Take inventory of your perspective, take inventory of your assumptions, take inventory of external perspectives that you are embodying, take inventory of your language. That's all from Giselle Open Sourced. Okay, now it's the thumbnail.